How's everybody doing? We are really glad that you're here with us to celebrate with us. So let me start by asking what seems kind of like an odd question, but I promise it'll make sense. How many of you, when you go on a trip, you are what would consider to be an overpacker? Where are you guys at? Oh, wow. Wow, there's a lot of luggage getting sold in stores. Okay. So when you go on a 3-day trip, it's like, 18 pairs of pants, 25 shirts, 7 pairs of shoes. Okay. How many of you are underpackers? Where are my people at? Yeah. You go on a 7-day trip, bring 2 shirts. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. And I take as little as possible. I do my best never to check a bag. And so a couple of years ago, my wife and I, we drive up to Stewart to officiate a wedding for an awesome couple here in the church, and I'm looking to see if they're here. They might be in the next service. But anyway, if you hear someone yell, it's probably them. Anyway, they're a great couple in the church, and so we drive up. It's at this resort. We do the rehearsal on Friday night, and it's kind of on in the back, kind of where the whole pool area is, and but it's really cool out. The resort is right on the beach, and so anyway, so then the wedding is set for 11 a.m. The next morning. So we go down there. We get down there a little before 11, and that morning, I mean, it's hot. I mean, like crazy hot, and I'm thinking like I don't know what we're gonna do, and I'm wearing a suit. The grooms, everybody in the wedding party's wearing a suit, and I'm like, I don't know what we're gonna do. Anyway, so the wedding's supposed to start at 11. The wedding does not start at 11. The wedding doesn't start till almost noon. Why? Well, if I tell you they're Cuban, that'll speed up the story a little bit. So that kind of is what happened. And so anyway, so we start the wedding, and I am sweating like a Pentecostal preacher. And I mean, I am drenched in sweat. I start sweating so much that it starts getting into my eyes. I start dripping, like it's dripping onto my Bible. And someone in the middle, like at the very beginning of the ceremony, goes and gets me a bunch of like a handful of napkins, and just like walks up, like this is not scripted, just like here, you're gonna need this. And so hands me that. I go through those in a matter of, I don't know, 2-3 minutes. And so, I'm sweating through my suit. And so anyway, like I'm feeling my shirt. I've got an undershirt, but I've got the dress shirt, and I'm feeling like this shirt's getting a little moist. And it's just not good. And so anyway, so then I read, I'm doing the wedding message, and I read that passage from Ecclesiastes that 2 can keep warm, but how can 1 keep warm alone? And I'm like, generally that's true, but in this weather, I think you'll be fine. And so nonetheless, and I was so grateful that now the couple, they were doing their vow. They had written these beautiful vows. They were going to do them in English and in Spanish, and which was awesome. And then the groom gets through his vows, English and Spanish. The bride reads hers in English, and then she says, I'm not really sure I could do this in Spanish. And I said, listen, if I can speak on behalf of everyone here who's melting, I think we'll just give you a pass. It'll be okay. And so anyway, wedding gets done, everybody's happy, and then I go back to the hotel room because we have our kids are at home. So my wife and I are driven up. Our kids are at home. We got someone watching the kids, so we're going to head home. And so we get back to the room, and I have sweat through my undershirt. I have sweat through my shirt. I have sweat through my jacket. I have sweat through my tie. I wring my tie out, and water leaks out. So it's like I had just gotten off Splash Mountain. It was more like Sweat Mountain. And so anyway, and then I remember I didn't pack any other clothes, and because I'm an underpacker, and I don't know what I'm gonna do. And so I take my shoes off, my socks. My socks are drenched, and then my wife says, "Bob, remember I told you to pack the 1 extra outfit just in case?" And I did, and I was like, "You are the most amazing woman. I've never loved you more than I have this moment right now." She's like, "Bob, don't worry. Look, I packed 6 extra outfits with shoes just for moments like these." And now, And let me tell you why I'm this way. Why I don't pack a lot, and most people that are underpackers usually have some horror story. When we would go on a typical Franquist family vacation, especially if it involved an airplane when my kids were young, it involved 3 giant suitcases, 2 medium-sized suitcases, 1 small suitcase, a Hello Kitty suitcase, a Lightning McQueen suitcase, a stroller, 2 car seats, my briefcase, a diaper bag, and a backpack that was just filled with Legos. I am the reasons airlines charge for luggage, by the way, and my sincerest apologies. Now, listen, the point is this, like life is better, way better, when there's less baggage. And listen, there's so many people carrying around way more baggage than what they know what to do. And it's keeping them from moving on. You see, baggage is the stuff that we kind of hold on to, that we pick up along the way. But it's the stuff that keeps us from getting where God wants us to go and becoming who God wants us to be. Now, here's what happens in most of our lives. Most of our lives, we start out with little to no baggage. Then somebody hurts us. Then somebody disappoints us. Then a relationship goes south. Then we get passed over for a promotion. It doesn't happen all at once. But we start to notice, if you do, that subtly we start getting weighed down by all of the baggage, all of the hurts, all of the pain of our past. And so what do you do? What do you do with all that? With the hurt, the resentment, the frustrations, the disappointments that have happened to us over the years? Listen, many people just get bitter about life. They get jaded to the point where they just can't ever be happy because they've never learned to let go. Or you can embrace what is one of the toughest challenges of being a Christian. That is how to let go of the baggage. It's the challenge of forgiveness. Now listen, most of us have dealt with people letting us down. Most of us have dealt with people not being there for us when we wanted them to be there. Most of us have experienced at some point people that we trusted betrayed us. The problem is Jesus is going to experience all of it in one night. Now, we've been doing something a little bit different on Good Friday for the last couple of years, because let me tell you kind of what happens in church life is that, we'll preach a message for Palm Sunday. Jesus rides into Jerusalem, proclaiming himself to be the Messiah. We preach the crucifixion on Good Friday, and then we talk about the resurrection on Sunday. And then we don't know what happened the rest of that week. Half of the Gospel of John is the last week of Jesus' life. And so what we decided to do a couple of years ago is that we were just going to start taking it one day at a time, literally, and say, what happened on Monday? And we did a whole message about what happened on Monday. You can go back and check that out. We did a whole message on what happened on Tuesday. And so today we're going to talk about what happened on Wednesday. That's going to lead to the arrest and crucifixion of Jesus. And so we arrive at Wednesday, and there's not a lot that's recorded about what Jesus did. We only know about what one disciple did. That at some point on Wednesday, Judas Iscariot leaves the group and betrays Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And by the time the Thursday is over, his closest friends are going to bail on him, and the one that he trusted the most is going to betray him in the worst possible way. Now, there's theological ideas that we're going to talk about in our time together as we explore these verses. But there's this other truth that I want us to carry as well that kind of becomes like the undercurrent as we're going through this. And that if you've struggled or people have let you down, if you've ever felt alone because people who should have been there for you weren't, here's what I want you to know. Jesus understands. And because he understands, he's never going to bail on us. That's why in Deuteronomy chapter 31, which he quotes later, he says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God is with you, and he will never leave you or forsake you." The writer of Hebrews quotes this, saying that Jesus is never going to leave us, never going to forsake us. So as we read this, listen, we are treading on holy ground. This is a powerful moment in the ministry of Jesus, because now everything is leading towards the cross. None of it that he deserved. Instead, he's allowing it to happen because he is standing in our shoes to die on our behalf. So we're going to begin in the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to start in chapter 26 in verse 1, and here's what we read. It says, now it came to pass when Jesus had finished all these sayings, that he said to his disciples, you know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered to be crucified. Then the chief priests, the scribes, the elders of the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him. But they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people. And if you pause there and give me your attention, 3 things that we're going to look at in relation to betrayal. And that is this, number 1, and this entire situation. Number 1, Jesus has everything under control. Jesus gets done teaching his disciples on the Mount of Olives, and he reminds them that within 2 days he's going to die. Now, somewhere else in the city, at that same time that Jesus is talking to his disciples, the chief priests and the power brokers of Judaism, they've all gotten together as well. And they are now plotting Jesus' death. And here's what I can't get away from as I read the passage. Jesus is saying, I'm going to die in 2 days. All of the religious leaders are getting together saying, we're going to kill Jesus, but we're definitely not going to do it in 2 days. Because during the feast, we're going to do it after the feast, and after the feast, we're going to deal with him. And so they are under the impression that they are somehow this think tank that's going to make it happen. They're plotting and planning, coming up with schemes and tricks. And by the way, that's what that word trickery means. It means like literally to catch with bait. It's like they're going to think that they're going to reel him in like a fish. And but they think that they're the ones that are moving the chess pieces. But Jesus is telling his disciples what's going to happen beforehand. Jesus says 2 days, and guess what? It went down exactly like Jesus said 2 days later. These guys hadn't figured it out yet, but it was going to go down the way Jesus said that it would. Why? Because just at seemingly the right moment, or the wrong moment, based on when you want to look at it, Judas Iscariot shows up on their door and says this, and later on in the same chapter in verse 14, then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you? And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. So from that time, he sought opportunity to betray it. And this is where I think we miss it sometimes, is that there are moments in life where we think we've got it all figured out. We see the board clearly. We're the geniuses, and nothing has gotten past us. The problem is, the longer that you live, the more that you realize that you and I see very little. This is why the more that you mature in your relationship with God, the less you start trusting in your own wisdom, and the more you start trusting in God's wisdom and waiting for him to open the door to speak to us and lead us to where it is that he wants us to go. And there's just these moments in life that happen where you just realize, like, wow, I really didn't see anything, did I? When I was 19 years old, which was about 10 years ago, so I was 19, and I was just starting college. And my dad, I had this piece of junk car that I had totaled. And so he offered to help me buy a car. And so what he said was, go check out some cars, and then narrow it down, and then I'll go tomorrow with you, and then we'll pick one out. So my wife and I had just started dating at the time. We've been dating a few months. And so we go. We go to car dealerships. We start looking at cars. And then we went to this one car dealership that maybe wasn't like the most reputable, but it had this car that I just loved. And now you got to understand, it's like 1994, all right? So just like a little bit of grace as I tell you the story. And so it's 1994, but I see this purple lowrider pickup truck. And so, you know, this is around the time that people were putting like hydraulics in their cars. So it didn't have hydraulics, but the car was basically like 2 inches off the ground. I don't know how it went over speed bumps. We were going to work all that out later. But I was like, this is the car. This thing is amazing. I'm telling Karen, this is like, you imagine us driving down the street, blasting, because the most important thing about the car was that there was very little. The bed of the truck had like no room because 3/4 of it was taken up with the massive speakers that were installed in this truck. And so it was awesome because you could be playing here and you could hear whatever I was playing, you know, in Palm Beach County. And so it was perfect. And so anyway, I didn't look at any other cars that day. I called my dad. I'm like, hey, I'm ready. I found the car. Let's do this. And so he gets there the next day. He's like, what did you find? I found a couple, but let's just go to the one that's going to be the one because this is really it. You're really going to love it. And anyway, I don't even want to spoil it. Let's just get there. So we get there. And my dad just, he just starts looking around at the car. And my dad's not even like a car person. But he's just, like normal, unlike me. And so he's just looking around and he's like, okay, Robert, I have a couple of questions. And I said, okay. And he says, did you notice that there's a giant crack in the windshield? That this thing is about ready, it's about ready. I'm like, okay, I didn't see that. Honestly, Bubba, I didn't see it. So he's like, okay. Did you notice all of the dents all over the car? This car looks like it just got back from Desert Storm. And I'm like, okay, I didn't notice that. And he's like, okay, did you notice that the passenger door doesn't even open? That one slipped by me, but I just figured that Carrie would just slide in from the the driver's side, and that would be it. And listen, it was one of those things. So we ended up, obviously, I ended up not buying that because my dad cared about me, and we ended up buying this Chevy Cavalier, like a very reasonable car. Later in life, someday I'll have to tell you a different story. That car later became infested with cockroaches. Someday I'll tell you that story. Come back some other time, I'll tell you. Anyway, but it was great. I called it the Cockroach Training Center because every time that I would walk out at night to get in the car, I'd see roaches doing laps on my steering wheel. Anyway, but this is, that's a true story, by the way. But this is when I learned the principle, right? That when I see as God sees, I will do as God says. That trusting God changes our perspective on the future. Now, before we leave this section, I want to talk about Judas Iscariot for just a moment. And here's what we need to know, a couple things that are important. The name Judas comes from, it's a transliteration of the Hebrew name Judah. So if you read about Jacob had 12 sons, the fourth one's name was Judah. That's who Judas was named after. And so the name Judah means praise. There was also another Judas in the group, Judas, son of James, and so they also called him Thaddeus, and so that's why they called Judas Iscariot. Now, Iscariot is not a last name. Iscariot is two words in Hebrew. One is Ish Karioth. Ish means man in Hebrew. Karioth is a town about 20 miles south of Jerusalem. So since he was the only disciple that was not from the region of Galilee, he was Judas, the man from Karioth. So that's what Judas Iscariot means if you're not aware. Now, I want to talk about, we're going to talk about the betrayal in just a moment, but I want to talk about the significance of the payment for a moment, which is really important. 30 pieces of silver. Why? It's not an insignificant amount. It's about 4 months' wages, or about $5,000 at that time. And so, but that 30 pieces of silver kind of weaves its way through the Bible. In Exodus chapter 21, if you're with us in our series in Exodus, we talked about this, that in Exodus 21:32, it's the payment that a master got if a servant was accidentally killed by an animal. 30 pieces of silver is also mentioned in the book of Zechariah chapter 11. And this one is important because Zechariah is prophesying, the prophet, he's prophesying that the people aren't listening to him and they will not allow him to shepherd them any longer. And I want you to read what it says in Zechariah 11. It says, I told them, if you think best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver, and the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and I threw it to the potter at the house of the Lord. Now let me explain what's happening here. The people pay Zechariah 30 pieces of silver, and it's such an insult to Zechariah that he throws it to the potter. And of course that comes back after Judas is filled with remorse over what's happened. He returns the 30 pieces of silver and does the exact same thing, and they end up buying a potter's field with it. The point is this. The religious leaders are fulfilling Bible prophecy, but don't even realize it because God is orchestrating all of this. And this is what we can be certain of when we read things like this, that he has not forgotten us. He is not distracted. He is not unaware. Things are proceeding according to plan. And if you think, man, I have ruined my life and God will never be able to use me. Friends, we just aren't that powerful. God can use you and will use you if you're willing to let him transform your life, because God really does want to use you. These guys don't, and God is still going to use them to accomplish his purposes. So what happens next? Look at verse 6. It says, "And when Jesus was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly fragrant oil. And she poured it out on his head as he sat at the table. But when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, 'Why such waste? This fragrant oil might have been sold and for much and given to the poor.' But when Jesus was aware of it, he said to them, 'Why do you trouble this woman? For she has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, but you do not have me always. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial. Assuredly, I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her.'" If you pause there and give me your attention. Second thing that I want you to know, and that is that Jesus wants my life to count for something. Now, this is an important note that I want to make as we read this story, and that is that this story actually happens a few days before. So there's certain ways that the gospel writers wrote. Sometimes they wrote chronologically, and then other times they wrote thematically, and that they were grouping certain stories together to make a point. The Gospel of John places this story just before the triumphal entry on Sunday. So it happened on Saturday. John is writing chronologically. Matthew is doing something different in here because he wants to tell us about Judas. And so why because all of this is related to Judas. Matthew records that the disciples were upset about this extravagant gift, but John is the one that records who it was that was the ringleader of this. In John chapter 12, it says this, "But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected, 'Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages.' He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And as a keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it." Matthew is giving us the story because then he's going to tell us about the desire of Judas to betray him. And so Judas's life is beginning to unravel. His greed is being seen, and when he sees this amazing act of worship and generosity. And that's one of the reasons I love that there's 4 gospels, because each of the gospel writers is giving us a little bit extra. And John recounts that it was Mary, the sister of Lazarus, who poured out the oil, and I put that in your notes in John 12:3. Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume, poured it on Jesus' feet, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Now, this oil that was called spikenard was not from the region of Israel, and so it was from India and had to be imported, and that's part of why it was so expensive. And by the way, I don't know, just kind of as an aside, there are several women that are called Mary in the New Testament. Mary was a popular name because in Hebrew it's Miriam, which was the sister of Moses. So many parents would name their daughters after the sister of Moses, Miriam. The most famous Mary, of course, is Mary, the mother of Jesus. The second is Mary Magdalene. Then there's Mary called Mary of Bethany. We see her a couple times in the Gospels. The first is in John 10 when everybody's rushing around, and she's sitting at Jesus' feet learning and growing. The second time that we see her is in John 11 when her brother Lazarus has died. Jesus meets her and her sister Martha in their grief, and they still believe. And then this alabaster flask becomes the moment that marked her life, this life of worship. She was a worshiper, and this moment encapsulated who she was. Listen, all of us want our lives to be known for something. We want a legacy that is attached to our name, for our name to mean something. But it's never one thing. It's never one moment. Most of the time, it's a lot of moments that are strung together that create a legacy. And listen, whatever it is that we want to be known for, it's never something that we do once. It's the things that we do daily that create a legacy. And that's the lesson that Mary leaves us with, that don't wait to do what's right. I have had the privilege of sitting with people in the final hours of their lives. And I can tell you this, nobody's talking about work. Nobody's talking about their hobbies. everybody's talking about the things that matter. They're talking about relationships. They're talking about friendships. They're talking about family. They're talking about their kids. And they are wanting to say the things that should have been said a long time ago in those last moments of life. My dad died almost 4 years ago. And one of the most meaningful moments in possibly my entire life was when I was, the few weeks that I was visiting him. I'd go see him every day when he was kind of slipping away. And I watched my parents reconcile and kind of put the past behind them as my dad was dying. And my parents were divorced before my second birthday. The first time I saw my parents under the same roof was at my wedding, and don't worry, they made it super awkward for me. And I mean, they just, were just like Cuban to the max on my wedding, and just like wouldn't take pictures together. It was just so delightful. And so anyway, but we get to this moment where they just made a decision that like whatever anger and whatever bitterness there was, that it just didn't amount to anything. And they just had to move on. I mean, and so here's my encouragement to you. Listen, if there's a call you got to make, then make it. If you need to apologize to somebody, then do it. Like, take the trip your wife has been asking you to take. I mean, if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? Go to counseling and fix whatever's broken so you can actually be happy. Tell the people that you love them. And tell them constantly so they don't ever doubt it. And you don't get to the end of your life and you regret kind of holding it. I always felt it, but I never said it. A couple of years ago, and I've shared this before, but I started doing this a couple of years ago, that I started telling my friends that I love them. And let me tell you something. All of my friends are kind of manly men, and that they did not take kindly to it. And I'd be on the phone with them about something, and then would call and like, "Hey, I love you, man." They'd be like, "What did you say to me?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I just love you, man." And they didn't know what to do with it. Like, okay, oh yeah, thank you for letting me know. I duly noted. Appreciate that. It's like as if I just told them that their extended warranty had just expired, and I just kept doing it. And I don't care how they respond. I'm gonna tell them every time, even if it's awkward. And by the way, it was. And I just kept saying it. And then I remember, I'll never forget this. I was on the phone with one of my friends, and we're getting like, "Hey man, I got a meeting, I gotta go." And he says, "All right, hey man, I love you." And I was like, "Yeah, that's right, you do." And that's right. That's right. I love you too. And it's because, and it's like, do you know how many times I had to be "I love you" one before they'd be "I love you" two? I was "I love you" one so many times. And then finally, I got to be "I love you" two. And it was such a good day. And I finally got there. And listen, but this is the point, right? Your legacy ultimately becomes the influence that you had on people, the way that your life impacted them. Well, we're going to skip forward a little bit in Matthew 26 to verse 47, where he says this. It says, "And while he was still speaking," he's praying, the disciples fall asleep a bunch of times. "And while he's still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude, with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, 'Whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him.' And immediately he went up to Jesus and said, 'Greetings, Rabbi,' and kissed him. But Jesus said to him, 'Friend, why have you come?' And then they came, laid hands on Jesus, and took him." We pause there and give me your attention. Last thing, Jesus is with me even when my friends betray me. Now listen, I know I'm breaking my rule, right? I've got to talk about only what happened on Wednesday, but the only way we kind of loop the story with Judas is to tell you what happened after he makes the deal on Wednesday. This is how it goes down on Thursday night. The reason the chief priest needed someone to find Jesus is the same reason why the disciples fell asleep. It was midnight. It was pitch black. There's no lights other than some torches. And Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, which is on the Mount of Olives, which is right across from the Temple Mount. And so the disciples have been sleeping, and Jesus wakes them up. And listen, I don't know about you, but you put me in a dark room, I'm out in seconds. And I'm going to tell you something. The most common phrase in our house when we are watching a show, most common phrase that's spoken in our house is this: is Dad still awake? That is the most common thing because, and I'm telling you, I remember when I took my kids to see movies, and and I remember the kids were younger. I took them to see this movie called Trolls, if you remember that, and I didn't. Which, by the way, I thought the movie was about mean internet people. Turns out it's not. It's about this village of people, and so anyway. But I told Mia, she was sitting next to me, and I was like, you know, it's weird. The movie, I remember the beginning with like the main troll, and then he got into some trouble, and then I closed my eyes for a second, and then they were all singing this song, and the movie ended. Like the whole thing was like 10 minutes, and so anyway, I fall asleep in movies, and I used to be so critical of the disciples for falling asleep, and then last week I went to go see the new season, like the last episodes of The Chosen, that depict this scene, and so and listen, they depicted this scene so well. The problem is I fell asleep when the disciples fell asleep, and that was like a real problem, and I'm like. So anyway, I just think that we should be a little more gracious with them. That's all I'm saying. I think that it can happen to anyone, especially if you're in a theater that has recliner seats and you just had a bunch of popcorn. So, anyway. So verse 48 says that Judas shows up with a great multitude. According to John's gospel, it's a little bit more descriptive. It says a detachment of troops. This is about 600 soldiers, plus people who were sent from the high priest. This is an overwhelming crowd. And then Judas has to give a sign, the one that I kiss. And now, that means Jesus looked very similar to everybody else, right? He's a Middle Eastern guy, about an average height as everybody else that's there. You couldn't pick him out of a crowd. Nobody would have been like, oh, Jesus, he's the one with the halo. He's the one that's glowing, right? I know that art typically paints him as that, but he looked common. And that's by design. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 53, that talks about the Messiah, here's what it says. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. Now, part of the story that's so hurtful is the Judas kiss. Why a kiss? Because the kiss was the greeting between a rabbi and his students. So, let's talk about betrayal. And let's talk about why Judas would betray Jesus. There's lots of reasons, and listen, books are literally filled, and theological journals are filled with reasons as to why. There's only two reasons that make sense, as far as I'm concerned. And they're probably the two most popular theories. One, Judas was disappointed that Jesus was not the kind of Messiah that he expected. He was not planning on overthrowing Rome or the religious elite in Israel, and consequently there was no position of prestige or power for Judas to take. And that's why he betrayed him and said, I've wasted my time. The second, and this is what I think is much more likely, is that the betrayal could have been Judas's way to force Jesus' hand to establish his kingdom if he were forced into a confrontation with Rome. What we know for sure is this, what we see in Luke's Gospel, chapter 22. Then Satan entered Judas, surnamed Iscariot, who was numbered among the 12. So he went his way and conferred with the chief priests and captains and how he might betray them. Now, we can't be 100% sure, but when Jesus is beaten and tortured, Judas has a change of heart and returns the money, which leads me to believe that he was tricked by Satan into thinking that he could somehow force Jesus' hand into starting some military campaign against Rome. And when that doesn't work out, he ends up taking his own life. Judas betrayed Jesus, and maybe Satan betrayed Judas as well. So, what do you do if you've been betrayed? What do you do if someone who you trusted, who you loved, who you thought was for you and with you, and they betray you? How do we How do we handle that? How do we deal with that? How do we move forward from that and not let that just eat away at us? Three things we're going to talk about as we close. Number one is realize this: betrayal can happen to anyone. And here's how I know that, because it happened to Jesus. And Jesus was the best judge of character known to man. Sometimes we beat ourselves up for allowing ourselves to be betrayed. And we think, if I was just smarter or wiser or had more insight, this wouldn't have happened. Listen, sometimes there's just no way of knowing. And I was betrayed by one of my best friends years ago, and there was no way I could have known it. And for months, I was like CSI. I was like trying to analyze the crime scene, like trying to figure out how it could have happened. And listen, there's no way. And you just, and by the way, I wish I could tell you there's like this amazing God story of how it all got fixed. That hasn't happened yet. But listen, if you've been betrayed, you didn't do anything to deserve betrayal. My friends, listen, you just can't live here. You got to move forward in forgiveness and freedom. And that's why number two, recovering from betrayal begins with forgiveness. When somebody sins against you, the healthiest thing that you can do for yourself is to forgive. Now, that doesn't mean you go out and trust the person again. Forgiveness is something that we are freely to give. Trust is something that people earn. But what happens is that people who hold on to this feeling of betrayal and never let go, it just kills their future. And because they don't want to forgive, and it just, every single relationship gets impacted by the one person that actually did the thing. You have to decide, and I know that this is easier said than done, but you have to decide to forgive. And it will probably take forgiving them 1,000 times for their betrayal before you stop thinking about it all the time. But if you don't make the decision to forgive, it will destroy your life and destroy your future. If not, if you don't believe me, let me encourage you to ask someone who's been through a bitter divorce because of betrayal and never forgiven. Let me tell you what happens if you don't already know how this story ends. The betrayal now impacts every other possible relationship they could ever have, and it keeps them from healing, and it keeps them from loving, and it keeps them from living in the future. Listen, when you forgive, you're letting yourself out of the prison as you decide to be free. And then thirdly and lastly, don't let the betrayal change you. Let it make you wiser, let it make you more discerning, but don't let what one person did impact your future. Don't let it make you a person who closes themselves off to others. And sometimes what we do, and this is a natural thing to do, but we just have to, kind of overcome that programming and override that programming. Somebody hurts us and we're like, no way. I'm never letting anybody in again. And the problem is it doesn't work. Because by cutting yourself off from everybody else, you're now hurting yourself. You want to get a betrayer back? Let me tell you something. Do this. Live a joyful life. Because you didn't do anything that deserved betrayal. So don't pay a penalty for something that you didn't do. And by the way, it never works out for betrayers. Judas ended up hanging himself. Jesus rose from the dead and had joy beyond the cross. Betrayers don't live well. They're not really living at all. But when you walk with Jesus, listen, you have fullness of joy. And that's what we're reminded of when we come to the communion table. That we can leave the hurt, the pain, and how betrayal wants to transform us into something we don't want to be. We can leave all of that at the altar. And we can allow Jesus to transform us into who He desires for us to be. And that's the part that changes your present and changes your entire future. So I'm going to invite the ushers to come forward, and they're going to hand out the communion elements. And so I'm going to invite you to just hang on to them. And by the way, they open from both sides, just FYI. And but hang on to them, and then we're going to partake in communion together as Pastor George and the band leads us.
down. Lord, speak to me now. You have all my attention. I will linger and listen. I can't miss a thing. Lord, I know my heart wants more of you. My heart wants something new, so I surrender all. 'Cause all I want is to live within your love, be undone by who you are. My desire is to know you deeper. Lord, I will open up again, throw my fears into the wind. I am desperate for a touch, 'cause all I want is to live within your love, be undone by who you are. My desire is to know you deeper. Lord, I will open up again, throw my fears into the wind. I am desperate for a touch of heaven.
Matthew writes, as they were eating, Jesus took bread. He blessed and broke it, gave it to his disciples, and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." Let's partake of the bread together. And then he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins." Let's partake of the cup together. And Lord, we want to thank you. We thank you for your sacrifice, but Lord, what you endured before it, during it, and afterwards when they put you in the tomb. Lord, for those of us that have experienced betrayal, for so many of us who've been sinned against at some point, Lord, you died for those sins too. So help us to be people who can forgive, because we are a people who have been forgiven. So we pray that you would do that work and much more as we submit ourselves to you, devote ourselves to you, and walk with you. And we pray it in Jesus' name, and everybody said, amen. Amen.
Thank you for joining us today. If you made a decision to follow Jesus and begin a relationship with him, congratulations. It's the best decision you're ever going to make. You may be wondering, so what happens now? Where do I go from here? Just text BEGIN to 62488 and we'll be able to send you this free gift. It's a book called Begin, written by Pastor Bob, and it's going to help you take those first steps on your new journey of faith. So remember, to stay up to date with everything happening at Calvary, follow @MyCalvary on Instagram and Facebook. Until next week, we love you, we're praying for you. God bless you.